minutes. If you have not followed his Triple H horse racing podcast, you're missing out. It's one of the best podcasts in the country.
Live from the Bayside Bunker, it's another edition of Wire to Wire here on the HHH Racing Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Roscoe, and I don't know how this pairing got allowed again, but to my right is my co-host for the night, Noah Maher, as we cover Saturday's Coast to Coast Pick 5, which not only covers 3 Santa Anita races, but it covers 2 stakes races, including the Grade 1 $1 million Florida Derby. Welcome in, everyone. Thank you guys all so much for joining in. I greatly appreciate it. If you guys do end up enjoying the podcast tonight, which we sure hope you do, please go down below the video player, hit the like button, and hit the subscribe button, because we would greatly appreciate it, because not only is it 100% free to do and the best way to help out our channel, but it also pushes these podcasts and others on our channel out into YouTube's algorithm to hopefully bring more horse players to the HHH Racing Podcast. And of course, for that, we thank you and we graciously appreciate our sponsor for Wire to Wire every single Thursday, which is First Racing and Santa Anita, as they graciously sponsor this show and the podcast. So thank you to them. But of course, we have normal podcasts coming your way every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So if that interests you at all, subscribe and hit that notification bell, because this week and next week, for that matter, are massive racing days. You had these boys on Tuesdays with their West Coast show. They covered Santa Anita this week and Santa Anita next week. Santa Anita next week, however, will be the Santa Anita Derby card, which will be fantastic. Our show, which, by the way, thank you all for the support. If you guys have watched that, we're almost at 2,000 views 24 hours in, which is unbelievable. By far the best start we've ever had on Betting and Boozing. We covered Florida Derby, this card, and the late Pick 5 in entirety. And, of course, Picks and Ponies just wrapped up before this show, and they covered the late Pick 5 for Arkansas Derby Day. Tons of Derby action coming your way over the next month. So, again, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss any part of it. We also have all of our podcasts get placed in audio form over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Anchor. So please go rate, review, and subscribe over to those if that interests you at all. One thing I wanted to bring up is our Keeneland Power Picks are fully available on hhhracingpodcast.com. And if you go on to that, for those that don't know, that are over on our Santa Anita Twitter, Santa Anita YouTube, and Gulfstream Park YouTube. Hello. Thanks so much for joining. We greatly appreciate it. You can go to hhhracingpodcast.com, which right on the screen here, Power Picks tip sheet, Keeneland Spring Only tip sheet, and you can see exactly what's in those tip sheets. You can actually see an example at the bottom here once it inevitably loads. There it is. You can scroll through all the different price plays, spot plays, pick 5 grids that are included in that. Also, all payment information is all done over on hhhracingpodcast.com. So go get your Keeneland Power Picks today. Our normal Power Picks are also done through Patreon, patreon.com/hhhracingpodcast. Link is also in the description below. And our beautiful website also has a ton more information about the podcast. Again, hhhracingpodcast.com for that. Noah, my friend, as I mentioned at the top of the show, somehow we were allowed to come back and do this after what? I think 2 weeks was the last time you were hosting. Now you get to sit back and enjoy the show.
Yeah, I'd say for our sake, it has been too long, but for everyone else's sake, I think it hasn't been long enough. But I tell you what, when the roles were reversed and I was hosting, you were co-hosting, if I remember correctly, I feel like we did pretty good on that sequence there. So we'll try to replicate things on Saturday, but yep. Either way, this Saturday, next Saturday, just the next couple weeks coming up, things are really ramping up, which is definitely exciting.
Yeah, and not only Santa Anita Derby next week, Wood Memorial and the start of Keeneland meet. It's one of the best times of the year if you're a horse racing fan. Lots of people in the chat. If you guys are new, if you're watching over on Santa Anita's X, YouTube, anything like that, you can comment in the live chat at the bottom right-hand side of the screen. Talk about the races. Lots to talk about, especially over at Gulfstream Park, but also Santa Anita, as they have great racing coming your way every single Saturday, as my West Coast co-host smirks a little bit. Jim Pillar's my friend. Nice to be back with you guys live. Should be a fun sequence, Jim. Always appreciate you joining the show. John Judge, my friend, good to see you. Look at these two beauties, and that is the case. John, I hope to see you out at Keeneland if you are going to be out there. This as I met you last, I think, in the fall. So if you're going to be in the spring, would love to meet you again. Mark Bogas, of course. Good evening, gentlemen. Has been a while for us to being on the screen, but as Noah mentioned, might not have been long enough, as Jim's already given Noah a little crap. He's got a little dirt over your lip going on there.
That's messed up, Jim.
Yeah.
I don't appreciate that.
And Andrew, my friend, welcome in. Two handsome fellas. Just lots of good looks on the podcast, apparently. And people are noticing a little bit. We're doing great, Andrew. Hope you're doing good. Obviously in Florida, said took a nice nap instead of going out golfing. Do understand, and you'll have a good time at the track tomorrow. And Terry Frank, my friend, good to see you as always. Again, comment in the live chat if you guys are here. This sequence for the Coast to Coast Pick 5 will start in Gulfstream Park 11th race, which is the Army Mule Stakes. It's a very tough race to kick off this Coast to Coast Pick 5. Then we head over to Santa Anita for Santa Anita 3, 4, and 5. And the closing race to cap off the Coast to Coast Pick 5 on Saturday is the Grade 1 Florida Derby. It's a really nice sequence and fantastic. Obviously, super friendly, 15% takeout, no CAWs allowed. So lots of things to love about this sequence and playable about this sequence as well. No, I mentioned race 11 starts this Coast to Coast Pick 5, and it's the Army Mule going 7 furlongs on the dirt for older males, 175,000 on the line, draws a field of 10. Lots of returning horses, some older horses getting back into the swing here. Morning line favorite is to the number 9, the Florida bred Macho Music, Javier Castellano, and Rohan Crichton, always a red hot barn down at Gulfstream. 3-1 on the morning line is your favorite. Second choice, just to the outside, a horse that we always loved to joke about back in the day that won us, myself and Patrick Kunsel, the Derby pool in Owen Almighty, Joel Rosario, and Brian Lynch, 7-2 as your second choice, which I thought was actually a little bit low. But Scotland is your third choice, Junior Alvarado and Bill Mott, 9-2 as your third choice. Putting the picks up on the screen right now. Noah, you're going with a horse that I really wrestled with, and I actually talked a lot about it. Chris Larmy had me on his podcast this week, so thanks again to Chris. Him and I were grappling with Pentathlon, which I had in first, I had in third, ultimately ended up with this horse in second, but makes a ton of sense, and you're getting good value in a race where, again, a lot of horses are coming back off layoffs, not sure how they're going to react, but Pentathlon keeping really good form at a good price.
Yeah, this race is quite the doozy to kick things off, and I feel like it's quite a doozy just because most of the favorites in here, you have to imagine that they probably have their sights set on the Churchill Downs in about a month and feel like, or I at least feel like they are probably just using this race to maybe springboard themselves to that race on the first Saturday in May. So I was maybe paying more attention to some of the horses where this race, the Army Mule on Saturday, might be more of their Super Bowl versus some of the other shorter prices in here. And with the difficult nature of this race, always demand a price here. I felt like Pentathlon maybe fit that. I thought was really impressive off the bench, winning that race by 5. It was a pretty decisive 5-length victory as the favorite that day at Tampa. I know the big worry is, Shug has really struggled down at Gulfstream so far and just hasn't gotten horses to get their picture taken, only 2 for 43. He's got quite a few seconds and thirds, but anytime, the bar's a little cold, it's a little worrisome. So I've been impressed with some of his races and more of his impressive races, I thought, on the page and kind of in his bullet chamber where things heat up front. And I think it's very likely that probably helped that scenario probably, plays out here with Macho Music. I know he's quick. The 4 for Safi's very quick. I could see those two setting a pretty honest pace and, just come with one late run. I know he's going to be a price. So that's just what ended up leading me to head to his direction.
And I mean, the numbers that he's run in terms of horses that are coming back, I mean, he's right with them all. And if he continues to improve what's second off the bench, a little bit, short rest on the bench for Shug, and you mentioned the cold streak that he's been on. I mentioned it on a Wednesday and I mentioned it on Chris's show today. It's Shug McGahee, right? I mean, even when the barn is cold, he could win 7 of 11 races this weekend, and it wouldn't be out of the norm for him. So I always take the cold. It's never good to see it, of course, but I always take it with a grain of salt. It never sways me too much. And you mentioned the pace scenario. This hits this horse right between the eyes. I mean, there's a ton of horses that want to vie for that early pace, and Concrete Glory, Macho Music, Rolando's been fast. Back 'em up's not slow. Jack's Promise has been quick, and even All Almighty to the outside is not slow either. So in theory, there's a lot of speed in here, which should set it up for both pentathlon and the horse I'll talk about in a little bit in Scotland. But I think he makes all the sense in the world. And Dylan Davis has come back. Happy to see him back on the track over the last couple weeks. And as long as this horse continues to show a little bit of improvement, I think 7 furlongs is probably this horse's best distance. If he can get the right type of trip from the inside on a good post, I think pentathlon has just a good amount of chance as any of them at a nice price of 8-1. But I went Scotland, and I understand why you don't have this horse in here. He's been really just meh the last couple times he's ran, headed by that Cherokee Mile, which I'm not sure really what happened that day at all. Obviously, then Bill Mott then gives him a little bit of time off. Now brings him back 6-year-old year, which is something I talked about. Maybe concerns me a little bit, but the work tab is what kind of negated that type of worry for me. And maybe it is a little bit down the line for him, but he really hasn't run too many massive races per se. Like he was second in the Forgo to Bookham Dano, which not on numbers, but by far is his best race. Finishing a length behind that horse is always really good. Won the Cherokee Mile last year. The one before, the one, not in 2020, 2025, the 2024 edition of the Cherokee Mile, but he's kind of put it together, not really on the win end, but he has one win at Gulfstream, going to also benefit from that pace scenario that I mentioned before. And 4 of the last 5 works, I mean, he had a 3 out of 90 work on February 14th, a 5 out of 73 work on March 1st, 3 out of 64 work on March 13th. And then Bill Mott drills a 3 furlong work, which is not something you see from him too often. Runs 1 of 9, runs the Bullet in 35-4. I don't know if they're trying to make this horse, get a little bit more fit and a little bit speedier into him or something like that with that type of drill. But I'm very interested to see how Scotland runs in here. Of course, Junior Alvarado's aboard in this race. Maybe he gets back to his best form, which 7 furlongs is his best distance with a pace scenario that could be very nicely attributed to his running style. I think Scotland makes a ton of sense as well. However, I understand why you could be against at 9-2, which frankly, this would be a complete pass for me if I was playing it vertically.
No, the problem is his best race completely fits, especially with the pace scenario that I think is probably going to lay out. And he's one of the couple in here that there's a couple that actually have some Lasix questions. And I think now that I think about it, I think the 2 actually, his race off Lasix was just okay when he ran in the Cigar Mile. It wasn't great. I mean, he got beat 11, but obviously it's great too. There's some pretty nice horses in there. But it's just weird. I kind of have reasons to believe that maybe you could see the better version of him in about a month or so in the Churchill Downs. But it's also on the flip side. I mean, his best race fits with any of them, especially with the pace up front. So I understand the pick. I've got him in the pick 5. It's just I have a weird feeling it might be favored just because I think the 9. I know the 9's a morning line favorite, and there's quite a bit of speed. So maybe people could go that direction. I just think things on paper set up for the 3 who you've got, and it's Alvarado and Mott. So you never really know if they're going to take a ton of money. I don't know. It's just enough reason for me to negate him on the win end, but he's on the pick 5 as well. We'll talk about later.
And I mean, that's a completely valid point. And the thing that I mentioned on the podcast today was, even though Scotland's the one I have on top, recognizing the best bet of the race is different from having a horse on top. Yeah. And I think in this race, pentathlon is that best bet. If you're going to play something vertically in here, I feel like he makes the most amount of sense at good value. And I agree. I honestly agree with you. I could see Scotland being favored in here. And if that's the case, I want no part of him vertically. However, you have to include him in the pick 5. Makes too much sense not to. And with lukewarm morning line favorites, you're going to get a decent shot at a good chunk from this race, no matter, as long as you find the winner and don't go too deep in a race where maybe, if you get a chalk at 5-2, something like that, that could only hurt the inherent value of playing a pick 5 like this. You have Macho Music in second, but also you have a horse that Andrew was very interested in and back him up. I believe Andrew had this horse on top.
Actually, I think it was Chuckles. I think it might have been
Was it Chuckles? Oh, sorry. Forgettable Freeman, of course. No, I'm kidding. But but 12-1 on this horse makes a ton of sense. And his best race, the pace scenario is the question, but his best race, 98, 98, 97, only makes, probably one of the best horses in the field in terms of best buyers.
Yeah, he's run numbers that fit for sure. Obviously, they're against levels that are quite inferior
Right.
to some of the horses that he's going to be facing on Saturday. And I think Charlie's right. I think you're probably going to get a better price than you probably should just because of the clunker that he threw in last time. But the fact that, Bobby DeBona has the confidence to throw him, back into a stake off of an effort like that, I think probably has to vote some confidence. But on the flip side, he's probably going to be a bit out of his element because his best races are when he's kind of up on the lead and controlling things. I mean, it's 298s where he was on the lead with slow paces, and he's probably going to find himself mid-pack just because he's not as quick as some of the other fast horses in here. But it was enough for me to take him in third at 12-1. And then Macho Music, I guess if somebody put a gun to my head and said who's the best horse in here, it'd probably be the 9 Macho Music. I mean, he danced every dance that a 3-year-old can dance over the summer. I thought his Pate Mile was absolutely massive. I mean, he broke like a rocket out of there, went down to what was a pretty dead rail that day on Derby Day, and just kicked away from that group. I thought that was really impressive. Yes, he was a little disappointing in his 2 races after that, both the Woody Stevens and the Amsterdam. But he's been off since July. I have to assume that there's some progression from 3 to 4, and he's another one where his best races fit. I actually watch some of his works in the mornings. He looks really good, but you could also make the case for him that they've got bigger and better things to point to. So he's probably the best of the speed. I know you've got the 4 in there who could honestly wire this field too. You never really know what you're going to get from him, that Safi runner. It's just one of those races where you could go just about 7 or 8 directions and I wouldn't talk you off any of them.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And Concrete Glory is another one like Pentathlon that he's been dancing every dance, but at lower levels. I mean, you have a starter 8,000 in there to kick off his type of 7-year-old campaign. Obviously, he ran in November, but then ran the Commodore, was absolutely nowhere. That was by far his worst race on the page, next to the True North, of course, and maybe the one he didn't even start in. But the Pelican last time was good enough. Gets Tyler in this race, who will be aggressive. The pace narrow is just the big question for him. So I agree. And the other horse I want to talk about is Owen Almighty, who is a horse that I would say is probably a lot better going one turn, but he's been a speedball one turn. He probably has the most tacticalness ability, if you will, to a lot of these others, like Macho Music's only go, Concrete Glory's only go. He probably has the opportunity to sit off a little bit, but I saw 7-2, man. That I could not play this horse anywhere near that number.
Yeah, I was wishing he would have run a little bit better in the Perryville, and maybe that was just a weird kind of funky time for him because he threw in that 16 buyer at Charlestown, which obviously we know is a pretty funky track. And, there were some high expectations that day because, like Howard said, the connections pretty much lauded from day one that he was a one-turn horse. So it was kind of disappointing that was kind of supposed to be the coming out party in the Perryville, and just kind of got smoked in there. But I guess he makes sense. I wish I could have seen some of the works. They actually didn't have they didn't have any of the works that he had worked at Paul Meadows that I could watch.
Yeah.
I wanted to get a better gauge on him, but I couldn't see any of the morning works. So he was just kind of a wait and see approach at this point. But it seems like, if he floats up and you get him now, you might not get another price like that going forward.
Yep, and that's exactly what I was going to hit on too. This time, this might be the time. Real quick, Jack's Promise, Dale Romans, Rajiv Marat. That's another one that, again, facing a lot lesser, but makes all the sense in the world. Now 4 years old, coming off that 97 in the Gulfstream Park Sprint. This is almost like the next step up for him. Another listed stake, maybe against a little bit better competition on a big day. Jack's Promise makes a ton of sense. I'm including this horse in the pick 5 because this is the other one that has a type of tactfulness that he doesn't necessarily need the lead. He is able to sit off, has done it against an N1X, now trying to do it against the listed stake. Different story, but I think is well enough to get a use in the pick 5 for me. But there's a lot of things to like about a lot of different horses in here, including Owen Almighty, if he gets back to that 7 furlong form we saw from him early in his career, including at Ellis Park and Churchill. But again, maybe the Churchill Downs is on his mind because of how well he's ran at Churchill, including that Derby, which he by far outran his odds that day. Rolando is not even out there. Back him up. You mentioned Concrete Glory, Scotland. I mean, Pentathlon, it goes on and on. Probably a spread race for most people. So if you can either hone your opinions in and catch one on a skinny ticket or try and catch a bomb, I feel like is going to be the best way to try and approach this race to kick off the late pick 5 on the coast to coast. In the 11th, I'm going 3-2-4. Noah's going 2-9-5. From that race, Noah, to what seems like a very straightforward one at Santa Anita. It's the Wilshire Stakes. It's a grade 3. This goes off at 2:01 p.m. Pacific time, which is 5:01 Eastern. And I should have mentioned that the Army Mule goes off at 4:40 p.m. Eastern time. And that's when it starts and ends with the Florida Derby, which I believe is 6:42 p.m. Eastern. So not it's nice, a quick, compact 2-hour sequence. But the Wilshire is a field of 5. I would most likely say a field of 4, because we'll talk about that in a second, with a very heavy morning line favorite in Rashmi.
I think it's Rashmi.
Rashmi, close enough. I'll take it for what it is, because making her 5-year-old debut, Kazuchi Kimura and Jonathan Thomas at 3-5 morning line. Second choice, the number 3, I Was Saved by Miss Artois for Juan Hernandez and Richard Baltus. Third choice in Hannah Buckle, Ayuso, and Leonard Powell at 9-2. Bringing up our picks on the screen right now. I'm going to go against Rashmi at 3-5. Noah, you're going with her. Makes a whole ton of sense. And there's one glaringly obvious point that I feel like puts her at least at a much bigger advantage than the rest.
Yeah, I mean, she's supposed to get the lead in here, right? And if she does, I think she's probably going to be tough to catch. And I mean, there's really not too much to talk about. She was pretty good about this time last year. She was able to get the job done in the megahertz, and then Liguria actually flipped the script on her, beat her, as well as Tirapati, who's actually a barnmate. Those two finished ahead of her in a really close finish in the Buena Vista at the beginning of March last year. Haven't seen her since then, but it seems like if she is ready to run her probably B+, A- probably beats this group pretty handily. I think a B+ effort probably gets it done. It's more of the opinion that not just the horses in this division that are in this race, but in the division in general. I mean, the American Oaks, which is a grade 1, I think was won with a 90 buyer, which I think just goes to show how small and diluted the girls are, especially on the turf out west. So it's more not lauding the praises of just the division in general. And she just asserts herself into a very weak division. And I just think she's flat out going to be tough to beat.
And I think you're right, man. I mean, just going through the field, 93 is an 84 on Antifona. Miss Artois has an 80, and I have on top, funny enough, an 84 for Hannah Buckle. And then I don't even need to talk about this horse. 55 buyer with on dirt and a 10 claimer last time out. Probably don't need to talk about that one. But Rashmi in this race, and I completely respect everything Noah said. I completely agree with everything Noah said. If she gets to the lead, she's probably gone. However, the only thing that's saving me a little bit, and maybe it's trying to find the Pete Visco poo-poo stat to try and beat a 1-5 horse in this race. But, over 180 days, and this horse has been off for 365 days, at any type of stakes for Jonathan Thomas is 1 for 8 in the last 5 years. And the last one to come off that type of layoff and win, even though it's a small sample size, was Corelli in April of 2021. And that was not even at Santa Anita. It was Pimlico. So, trying to play against the norm, hasn't won this type of thing. I know it's a very small sample size, but in the last 5 years, am I trying to get too cute? Probably. But Miss Artois early in her career had a little bit of speed, and Noah's been saved by her a couple times.
I love this horse.
And that goes to show you that the fact that he has this horse third is probably why I'm absolutely nuts.
With the brain, not the heart.
Yeah, I know. And that's probably why I'm just way out of my element here. But trying to play against, a horse that's coming off an extremely long layoff for a trainer that doesn't necessarily do it too often, let alone win that often with it. So I'm probably just getting too cute here. But Miss Artois, she sits right off the one. Maybe the one's not, fully ready, fully cranked, not ready off the layoff, needs one. Miss Artois with JJ hopping aboard here. And I know Jackson shudders at the words Juan Hernandez nowadays, but trying to beat her with a horse that probably sits second just off and tries to go by her at the quarter pole. Horse you think has any chance of that is the 4 Hannah Buckle, who ran in the RJ Frankel last time out. Cold pace, ran perfectly fine at 17-1. Now coming back into this field, she'll be a little bit farther back, probably more of an underneath type in your eyes.
Yeah, I guess if I had to pick an alternative between the 4 and the 3, I'd go with the 4. I thought her last race in the Frankel was okay. I mean, they really crawled up front, and she didn't really get much pace to run into, and I thought she ran, just okay. I mean, I think she pretty much split the field that day, was only a length and apart, just behind some of those horses that went 1-2 around the track. I think Paradise Lake was just kind of sitting right off the pace, went by, and then ended up, beating that field. And she, I guess you can make the case that she answered the Lasix question last time in that Frankel. I kind of think some of her better races have been with pretty good trips, and a lot of them also come at Del Mar. I mean, you can see she hasn't even hit the board at Santa Anita, but she's run good enough races that I think, if you have to bet an exacta, I'd bet 1-4. But to your point, I mean, you said the one's going to be 1-5. I think she's going to be 1-9. I really do believe that. And if you can make at least a somewhat legitimate case to bet against a 1-9, then I'm all for it.
It's just the more of the thing with, trying to go against a horse that's off a massive layoff at 1-9. Just getting anyone else in this race, frankly, doesn't even matter who you pick. As long as you pick the winner, it blows up this pick 5 exponentially. Because you could argue that, 70% of tickets are going to single this one. And, maybe it's just a free square. But if I use one other horse in there and that horse comes through, you double your ticket. It's kind of the risk you take with doubling the ticket.
Yeah.
But, you could get 5, 10, 15x the payout that you would if the one does come in. So I know it's a small field, so it doesn't create the most inherent value. But, again, beating a 1-9 creates the most inherent value of them all. The other horse we didn't talk about was Antifona, where actually Thiago Pereira chooses to go in this race for Vlad Serin. Run some really nice races as well. Again, maybe just a cup below what the one was running in her past. But again, running into a lot of cold paces, sitting a little bit closer, will probably be last early. Makes sense if she can improve, but always tough when you have to improve 10 buyer points. And that's coming from someone that picked against the horse that's 10 buyer points above the rest of the field. In Santa Anita third, I'm going 3-1-2. Noah's going 1-4-3. Jim Pillar's outside the rail horse. This race is a bit, when I look in the mirror, just a little bit ugly. Jim, come on. You're selling yourself short, my friend. That you got to look at let's say the Florida Derby for yourself in the mirror. But Matthew, I see you in the chat, my friend. He says Owen Almighty has faced a hellacious fraction in his last 4. Will sit and outclass them late. You could absolutely be right, especially if he comes back to that those one-turn numbers. Noah, Santa Anita 4 is the next one up. It's a field of 6. A maiden claiming 20,000, 6 furlongs, and they run that California condition of the 3, 4, and 5-year-olds in here. Morning line favorite is going to be the number 4, Elsa Dutton, at a pretty heavy price of 6-5 with Ayuso aboard. Second choice is the number 5, Manhattan Beauty for Jaramillo and Richard Baltus. Third choice, the number 3, Dad's Bad Bunny, Kyle Frey and Jonathan Thomas. Now, you're going with the 6, Miss Hot and Cold, who I'm also very interested in this race as well. We all have the same 3. Going against Dad's Bad Bunny in terms of the favoritism and opting for the 4th choice in this race in Miss Hot and Cold.
Yeah, I like the way you're thinking. I was flipping back between 5 and 6. I think my general opinion is I'm going to try to beat the 4. I think you have to beat the 4, especially if you're singling the 1 and the 1 comes in the race before. You got to try to beat favorite somewhere else. So I'm not going to use the 4. I'm going to go, obviously, 5, 6 in here. Miss Hot and Cold, I thought you'd probably get a better price come post time. There wasn't really anything wrong with her debut. I know it came a while ago, but anytime, you debut a horse going 2 turns on the grass and they get a little tire late, I feel like you can, excuse it a little bit because, maybe they're not obviously crank first out. And Paul Geary's not really a guy that you see a ton of production, early on in their careers. Obviously been off for a while, probably drops into a race that suits her a little bit better at this point. I mean, she's already 5 years old, but they only paid $30,000 for her, so the $20,000 tag that they put her out for today is really not, a huge concern. And, Maldonado's very good at getting horses out of the gate. And I don't know if he was actually working on her in the mornings, but there was one of the works I watched. I think it might have been the one on the 23rd out of the gate. And I thought it was actually pretty promising, at least from some works that I've seen in other horses at this level. So I thought it was enough to put her on top. And then the 5, I know you'll go into the 5, but it just seems like that race 2 back where she got a 64 buyer. I think the time form pretty much matches up with that 2. Feels like if she runs back to that race, I think she's probably going to be tough to beat. But I obviously, like I said, the opinion here is to try to beat the 4.
Yeah, and she's New York bred, was in the Bill Mott barn early in her career. Ran in New York bred, both on the dirt and on the turf. On the dirt, she might still be running from that time on July 25th. August 21st was a little bit better, showed a little bit, got a 45. Not too much to go through in a race like this. There's a couple others to the inside, which we'll talk about here in a second. Always been disappointing. They paid $180,000 for her. It was probably some type of private purchase in the middle of that. I'm not sure what they did, but $20,000 is a drop. Most likely suits her well. And you're getting Jaramillo aboard, who can't seem to do anything wrong on the Santa Anita turf right now. So Manhattan Beauty, hopefully on the drop, will be the one to take it to try and beat the 4 at 5-2. But Noah, you mentioned we're playing against this horse. She's just really not shown any improvement at all. She was in the Phil D'Amato barn, and running 53, 55, 53, 55 is not necessarily something that you love to see, especially from a trainer like Phil D'Amato. Taking her off the turf, putting her on the dirt, and last time ran in the 20 on the dirt, now on the turf. And for a new barn, it's just one of those things, especially at even money, for me, that I always like to try to beat.
Well, you have to kind of remember the state bred maiden claimers are pretty equivalent to the open company maiden claimers. Those maiden 50s that are for the Calbreds are pretty equivalent to the maiden 20s. So in my eyes, it seems like she's had 3 chances at the level at short prices, and she hasn't gotten the job done in either of those 3. And there's really no reason for me to believe that she's gotten really any better since she ran those races back in May and June. And speaking of that last race, I mean, it looks a lot better on paper than it did visually. I mean, she was a pretty heavy favorite that day. The horse that she was chasing ended up winning that race by over 4 lengths. It was 26-1. And when you go to the buyer figures, obviously at first glance, it looks like she took 9 starts to get it done. She actually lost 3 quarter horse races at Los Al within that. So she was 0 for 11 going into that race. It took her 12 starts, and at 26-1 to win that race. It screams like that was just not a very good field. She's there down on the inside. She's not really a huge filly to begin with. I mean, she's pretty small little gray down there. And she gets pretty tired late. I know she was well clear of the rest of that group, but I feel like I brought enough reasons to believe that that group really wasn't all that good. So it was enough for me to play against her. I mean, she's tiring late here, so it was. But I got really excited.
I forgot about that, dude. I forgot about that. Was what's his face? I cannot remember the name.
Gotta be a Los Al jockey.
Yeah, it's Escobedo from Los Al. I love the 20,000 claimer double Frankie Dettori Dubai World Cup fist bump that he's got going on there. But yeah, I completely echo every single sentiment you said on Nelson Dunn. Just feels like if she's going to be a short price again, it's the one to play against. The 2 couple of the inside again for Paul Aguirre. With Montage Blue, and Despite for Gloria Haley and Vlad God, I can never remember his name. What's his first name?
Vicente Del Cid.
Vicente Del Cid. I always want to say Vladimir because it's Del Cid's close to Serin. Yeah, that's what I always want to say. But the only other horse, I guess we'll talk about one more horse in here, Dad's Bad Bunny, who we are both playing against, who's 3rd choice on the morning line. First time turf, Malibu Moon. Mayer in here, Kyle Frey, Jamie Thomas in here, just run some comparable numbers on dirt. And this is the big drop from the maiden special weight to the maiden claiming, even though running in state bred to open. Kind of just seems to me like they're trying to find something with this horse. Because Malibu Moon obviously runs well on turf, and the dam actually did run well on turf, but 1 for 24 on the dam side, and the 1 win was a turf route. In these types of 4,000 claimers and stuff like that. So one to try and play against maybe for a smaller barn.
I mean, she'd be the 4th horse, right? I mean,
yeah,
her race 2 back probably puts her squarely in the mix. I thought she ran okay that time. She faded really badly in a slow pace that was won by a horse that she was chasing on the lead in Tiger of the Sea. It was another one where it took her quite a few starts to get the job done. And she actually had some decent works going into that race. And then the 2 works on March 15th and March 22nd are just no bueno. So it just seems like a bit of a desperation drop. Maybe the drop itself, takes care of that, and she's able to beat this group just based on class alone. But I still like the 5 and 6 more.
I completely echo both of your sentiments that you said. In Santa Anita 4, I'm going 5-6-4. Noah's going 6-5-4. I would say very base, but you went with the 6 instead of the 5, so I can't give you that title. Race 5 is a maiden claimer 50 at Santa Anita. It's the penultimate leg of the Coast to Coast Pick 5. It's going 1 1/8 on the turf for that 3, 4, and 5-year-old maiden group. Field of 8 in here. The morning line favorite is the lukewarm one in this race, and the number 1, Justivar for Ayuso again on taking the mount. Second choice to the outside is the 8, Channel Place for Jaramillo and Doug O'Neill, 7-2. And your third choice is not shared. It's the number 3, Holly Go Quickly. One of a fantastic name, Kazushi for Mike McCarthy. Bringing our picks up on the screen, Noah, right now. I'm going with Holly Go Quickly. You're going to the outside for the Doug O'Neill runner, Channel Place, who I have in there, and then Velvet Lily for the John Sadler barn.
Yeah, this is a race that we talked about on Pacific Horse Players, because this is the race that kicks off the late pick 5 at Santa Anita on Saturday. And I know the other 2 boys, Ryan and Jackson, were a bit bigger fans of the race that both the 1 and the 3 are coming out of. The 1 on October 1st that Justivar, the 1 ran second, and the 3, Holly Go Quickly, the one that you've got on top, who I would take out of that race if I were to take anybody out of that race, just because the rails were out. Really wasn't a ton of speed up front. So if I was to take somebody out of that race, it'd be her. With that being said, I hated the race so much that I actually took 3 horses out of a race that technically didn't even go, because the horse that broke through the inside rail and was running on the actual rail itself while the rest of the field was running outside of the temporary rail, because they had the rails out to either 20 or 30 feet that day. And they actually called it off because that horse was potentially going to interfere with the rest of the field. But Channel Place is one where if you throw out the race that obviously was a non-wagering event, she was one that was dropping down from much better company into a race that it just seems like this is not the bottom of the barrel, but there's just not a ton of great fillies in here. And the 1 and the 3 have had plenty of chances, and so have the 5 has definitely had some. I guess the 7 would maybe be the other one I can make a case that would still maybe have a bit of upside, but just that big drop, especially from the open maiden special weight to the open maiden claiming, I think is going to be enough for her to outclass this group. She hasn't really shown a ton of speed outside of that race. Her second career start at Del Mar, they kind of resorted to taking her back, which I was a little bit surprised by, because I thought she actually ran okay in that second career start at Del Mar. But it just seems like the drop by default is probably going to put her a little bit closer than she would be against some horses that are a little bit better than her at this point. And like you said, Jaramillo can do no wrong, and same goes for Doug O'Neill. So it was enough for me to lead in her direction.
Yeah, and I completely agree with everything. I mean, she was ranging up pretty well in that race. And I love how they still have the last finishing number in there, even though the race they called it by the quarter pole. Look at the 5 spring line off that last looks fantastic from that last running line. However, she was galloping and what ended up widening by a length down the lane last time out. So it's an interesting one. You completely cross that line off. You can watch the replay if you want, because they ran the whole, the race to the quarter pole.
Much, yeah.
And she was ranging up really nicely. So Channel Place is absolutely one I want to use. And everything that Noah said, I completely agree with, as I have the horse in second and will be using in the pick 5. I went with Holly Go Quickly, and you are right, Noah. She's had pretty much all the chances in the world. Last time out, I thought she ran really well. You mentioned there wasn't a whole lot of closing being done, especially from the far back, and that's where she was placed early, was 7 of 7. And Florent got her out really nicely, and she was finishing very, very well. And maybe that's just a testament to the horses in front of her getting tired, but this goes back to the 1 1/8, where she's ran also very nice races, and that it could be the concern for a lot of others in here. I know, again, that the race that didn't technically go was at the 1 1/8 But the only one I truly want out of that race is Channel Place. I know you have the 7. I'll let you talk about Velvet Lily in a second, but the mile and 1/8 I think should fit Holly Go Quickly very well. You Mike McCarthy, Kazushi Kimura, who's doing very well out in California. It's very good to see her. I know she's over 7 on the Santa Anita turf, but that 6-7 last time out, I feel like might springboard her, and this low 70 might be good enough to win this type of race, where there's a lot of others in here that I make plenty of case against trying to improve to that 70 buyer. But White Lily, Noah, is the horse that you mentioned that might have that little bit of upside. You know, she started off as a very late 2-year-old in an open sprint at Del Mar, went to the lead in that race and didn't really, faded a little bit pretty decently in that race. But that speed going to route was completely gone and closed actually really well in that first maiden 50, throw out the mile and 1/8 race going back to the same spot in this one.
And you're exactly right. I mean, she showed some pretty good speed. I know the fractions for the 5 furlong event at Del Mar, that's pretty much crawling, but at least she showed a little speed. And then she was just kind of behind the 8 ball in that race on January 23rd. But it seems like that was an okay effort and an okay race as well, as the winner Tiara came back and beat Winners for the first time in her first start off of that win. So it seemed like the race was okay. That McCarthy runner should be, pretty decent 3-year-old filly there. There was another next out winner, I believe, in there in Flamingo Star. And then I believe she was actually 7-2 because she was one of the few you could actually see the chiclet in that race. And then when you go to DRF, obviously you can't see that, but she was 7-2 and took a decent amount of money. So I guess I wouldn't be surprised if she took some more action here on Saturday.
Yeah, and I can't see her in this. Oh, come on, man.
I think that says Channel Place was 2-1, so both of those were, taking a
Channel Place 2-1 right there. And then let's see if we can click through it real quick. What am I looking for? Velvet Lily, the 5. Oh, there it was. Hold on. What is that? 7-2. So yeah, she was bet down pretty heavily that day as well. So, and one that's lightly raced compared to a lot of others in here, could have more upside. And the only race that she's run at this type of route level is a 64. And if she improves off that, has every right to win this race as well. So I can echo all the sentiments. Last horse we'll talk about, and then we'll move on to the Florida Derby, is Springline, Ryan Hansen. A horse, like I said, looks really good by that last running line. Of course, does not matter at all. But she ranged up real nice in that race. And the mile and 1/8, if she can get to it, I think she has every shot. However, that race 2 back going the mile, she kind of was there and then petered out a little bit at the end. And that's what makes me think the mile and 1/8 might not be her strong suit when they run the full mile and 1/8. Although something else I just noticed was that they show the horse winning next time out in this running line here, which is also kind of a funny thing to point out. But anyway, Noah, I think she makes at least a lot of sense underneath. I think she has to improve or at least get back to those Del Mar numbers to be able to win in this spot. But if she has the tactfulness that she has last time, she's going to get a jump on others.
I mean, she's the only winner in a field of non-winners. So, I mean, let's call the racing secretary. I don't know how she's eligible for this race here. But no, I mean, you're exactly right. I was a little disappointed with her effort 2 back when she kind of finally dropped in for the tag and got to the level that she was supposed to. She faced some decent horses and another horse that's actually in this race. And then, like you said, when I was watching that replay, I mean, she was ranging up like she had a big shot in there. And she was 8-1 on the board too. So it seems like the 3 horses in that race, we're taking a decent amount of action. And you could kind of go either way with 3 of those. But at the end of the day, I was more appreciative of that race that didn't even finish versus the one that the 1 and the 3 were coming out of. So I feel like I got to stick to that.
And you might be completely right. His Channel Place is probably the one I want out of there, as I have her second. You have her, on the win end. In Santa Anita 5, I'm going 3-8-5. Noah's going 8-7-5. Now, it's the race that feels like it can't be talked enough about, but also probably it's been talked about a lot over the past week. But it is the Grade 1 Florida Derby Stakes, of course, for $1 million, going a mile and 1/8 for 3-year-olds. As I'm not saying anything, insane out here, as we all know, it's for 3-year-olds. Field of 9, headed by the big 3, and I'm not talking about LeBron James. It is the morning line favorite and the number 2. Damn it. Number 2, Chief Wallaby for Junior Alvarado and Bill Mott at 2-1. The number 4, Commandment for Flavian Pratt and Brad Cox at 5-2. And the Holy Bull winner, the number 6, Nearly for Johnny V and Todd Pletcher. Of course, 4th horse being the Puma, the Tampa Bay Derby winner, Castellano and just Gustavo Delgado at 9-2. Noah, bringing up our picks on the screen right now. I am going with Commandment. You're going with Chief Wallaby. The 1-2 punch from the Fountain of Youth coming back into this race at Gulfstream Park.
Yeah, this is a pretty exciting rendition with these top 2 that we've got here. Obviously, the 2 that ran 1-2 in the Fountain of Youth. I know there's been a lot of talk about, who ran the better race, blah, blah, blah. I'm glad we get to appreciate that both of those 2 ran really well, and then they're coming back here to kind of face off once again. And Nearly, I know a lot of people that I respect have made good cases for him, and he's got just as good a shot as anyone. I just keep going back to the fact that Bill Mott really didn't want to run Chief Wallaby last time, and the fact that he did, and he ran so well. And people, obviously, with the conversation about, who ran the better race, they get into the bits and pieces of what happened in the race and whatnot. Regardless of who that horse was kind of ducking inside, and that's Commandment I'm referring to. Regardless of who that is to the inside, I mean, you can't deny the fact that Chief Wallaby was wide. I mean, he was wide. He was flat out wide, had a wide trip in there, and I thought ran pretty respectable in a race that they weren't necessarily pointing to. And it just kind of seems like, with that being said, this Florida Derby was something that they were going to be targeting all along. And he's the one, I think, that is in most desperation for Derby points. I know Nearly has 25, and he doesn't necessarily have to win, but Chief Wallaby is right there with him. And I just think he has every reason, at least the most reasons, in my opinion, to suggest that this is a race that he needs to be very successful in. And it's weird because I figured people would really be backing him just off of that effort, just a wide trip, and didn't want to run there or whatnot. But like I said, a lot of people that I respect are going different directions with Commandment and Nearly. A couple of people like the Puma. I thought he would be a pretty considerable favorite in here, and it feels like there might be an outside chance that he isn't, which it would be great for me. I think 2-1, he might be even bettable at that price. But at the end of the day, I'm really glad that we get to see these big 3, LeBron, D Wade, and Chris Boss face off in race 14 at Gulfstream on Saturday.
Even as not a basketball guy, that's something I can appreciate. But
it'll be fun.
Look, and this is a hill I'll die on, and maybe it's something that might not be the case, but I really don't think Chief Wallaby's trip was anywhere different than what Commandment ran. Oh. And you've seen, like Noah touched on, a lot of people, obviously he was wide. Like there's no sugarcoating that. But Commandment was inside, Chief Wallaby goes to the outside, has all the momentum, has the clear path around the way. Commandment sat in behind, had dirt in his face the entire way, had to wait. Granted, the Moses parted the Red Seas, as Pete Aiello said, for Commandment, but not to mention how dead that rail has been really all meet long. And, he waited. And when that hole opened up, he shot through there really nicely in being able to beat Chief Wallaby. And the thing that I love, and people have talked about it on Twitter for an extensive amount of time, was the gallop out. You're getting an extra 16th of a mile here. I personally don't ever think Chief Wallaby in that last race was going by Commandment. I read great race riding. Sometimes he does it a little too much, but race riding as in he goes out to meet Chief Wallaby, really doesn't even ride the last, couple, 100 yards or whatever, because he knows that he's not going by him. I'm a big fan of Commandments, and I'm trying to put the bias aside and just look at it from just a straight angle. I think these 2 horses are by far, if one of them wins this race, unless Paladin freaks in the Bluegrass, one of these 2 horses will be the Derby favorite come the first Saturday in May. Even if they both run exactly like they ran in the Fountain of Youth, where one of them wins by a neck. And if Commandment takes the route of sovereignty and finishes second in the Florida Derby, I'm not saying I'm too mad by that at all. But this is just going to be a really fantastic prep race, harboring what looks like the best 3-year-olds on paper. I'm going with Commandment. Noah's going with Chief Wallaby. And I think either one of those you can make a fantastic case for, not only now, but if they continue to show their promise in the first Saturday in May. Nearly, Noah, one, I feel like he's lost in the shuffle just from the recency bias, I think, is, running in that Fountain of Youth, how good it was of a battle between Commandment and Chief Wallaby. I feel like his odds are going to be third choice just from the recency bias alone. But I know the Holy Bull, you and I have questions about that type of field and who he ran against. But my thing with Nearly is he might just have a tactical advantage in this race. He's going to be in front of both Chief Wallaby and Commandment. And whether he's good or better or not than them is to be seen. But it's Todd Pletcher, it's Johnny V, the exact type of Derby connections that you want in a race like this. And really the only other horse he has to face in here with his speed, Wayne's Law, but who seems to be pretty slow. Albus is pretty quick, but probably not as quick as horses like that. But Redland Rebels, who is scratching in this race, if I'm not mistaken, he's going to Oaklawn. So that takes out a major speed contender. So if you have Wayne's Law out there and Nearly just sits right off of him, that's my only concern for both Chief Wallaby and Commandment, is that Nearly might just have a tactical advantage in this. Who's better is to be seen.
Yeah, we'll find out. I don't really think there's much case to be made in terms of the fields that he's beaten his last couple of races are really head and shoulders below what he's going to be facing in the kind of the two-headed monster out of the Fountain of Youth with Commandment and Chief Wallaby. It's just, I'm trying to think of it from a likely perspective. If there was one of those two closers in here, I'd say, okay, there's a good chance that he's able to hold one of those two off. If those two really bring their best, is he good enough to hold off both of those? I don't know. Maybe he is. I think the other two might be a tick or two better than him at this point. But it's anyone that likes him, I'm not going to talk you off because, like you said, Kyle, and I think it's really important. There's just so much recency bias with those two. And a lot of people that I've seen just on Twitter were super enamored with the effort from both of those two out of the Fountain of Youth. I feel like we're kind of disrespecting the effort that he's kind of shown. Granted, they were maybe lesser company, but he's doing it the right way. And why can't he do it again?
I agree. And I think the reason why people like him so much is just that tactical advantage as well. Mm-hmm. I think there's no saying that, there's no questioning the fields he's been running against have been suspect. Even though Incredible came back to obviously run that monster race in the Virginia Derby, he's still got an 88 buyer in there. So it's nowhere near the 97 or 98 that Nearly has ran these last couple times. So how he faces up to these big boys in here will be seen, but I think he has just as big of a chance, if any of them. And I feel like a lot of people, especially from a betting standpoint, are going to be taking those three and just blanking across. If you can either single one of them, if you have a really big opinion in this race, maybe weight them differently with the ABC method. There's certain ways that you can get above that type of angle. I know that you and I are both taking that angle, so I'm interested. I'll show our grids here in a second, but I think if you can go skinny, at least throw one of them out. If you can take out a little bit of that base bet, will get you a little bit of an edge above a couple others that might just take all three, if not all four. Last horse we'll talk about, then we'll move on to our grids, Noah, before we end at the hour mark, is the Puma. And the Puma, I thought he ran fantastic in the Tampa Bay Derby, albeit a little slower than the couple numbers that have been running out here. It's just a really weird spot for him. Like he has the points from the Tampa Bay Derby. He has the 50 points. That's more than enough to get him in. And by the way, at that Tampa Bay, when I was there, not a single horse passed anybody on the dirt all day long, which is why I ended up going with the horse I did in that race, who, again, is still running out in Tampa Bay as we speak. And actually who didn't break and didn't go to the lead, so it didn't even matter what I picked. But he was the only one to pass all day long, and that might have been done to the rain that came in earlier than that. But it's just, for me, and I'm not questioning Gustavo Delgado. He's done this before. He has the mage type of thing, mage connections as well. They know how to win these big races, including the Derby. Maybe he needs one more. It's just a very interesting thing why he's coming back in 3 weeks for the Florida Derby.
I mean, I guess they figured that they don't want to wait, 2 months to run him again. So I feel like it's probably either run him here or you take him to Kentucky early and maybe race like the Lexington. But
that's what
I feel like if you are trying to maybe space out those races and you want kind of that smaller gap, you don't want 2 weeks before the Derby. You'd probably want 2 weeks after that first initial race, which is probably the thinking here. But in terms of the race overall, I'm just always a bit dubious when the fields are so bunched at the finish line like that. And that's no shame at all. I mean, I thought he ran really well, was wide in that race. And there's some people I respect that maybe have that race a little faster than maybe Bayer and time form indicate. So I think if this was a scenario where maybe it was a week or two from now and we can maybe see his best or another step forward or a very likely step forward, then yeah, maybe I would give him more of a consideration in terms of what we've seen from the big three in here. But off of that break, just a bit of a lighter number in buyers that I tend to trust a little bit more than anything. I know time form is something I certainly respect as well. I just got to go with the trustful number in here. And obviously the break is something that you definitely can't dismiss.
Yeah, and there's a couple people in the chat that I'll point out, then we'll move on to the grid. Matthew likes nearly, says won the last 3 in a jog, which is absolutely true. And he needs the points. Main 2 contenders do not. That's absolutely true. And he loves the March 13th work. So I absolutely completely agree with you, Matthew, from that standpoint. And Jim says usually has their surface rock hard on big racing days and typically favors front runners, likes nearly to hold them off late. I think both of those are very good points. I'm going 4-2-6 in the Florida Derby. Noah's going 2-4-6. Noah, putting up our grids on the screen right now. To you first, my friend. You have 2 singles on the board here in Santa Anita 3. You're singling the horse that's most likely going to be 1 to 1,000,000 in that race. But again, there's no difference and shame in that, considering that he might just be way by far the best horse in that race, even off the layoff. And then we talked about trying to inherit the value in the Florida Derby by picking one that you have a strong opinion on, and you're going with Chief Wallaby.
Yeah, I mean, I think just looking at the sequence as a whole, the kickoff leg, the Army Mule is by far the toughest race. So I've got 5, hoping to get out of there alive with 5 there, and then obviously it's a very likely single. I mean, you said 70%. I think it could maybe be upwards to 80-90% of people that are actually playing the sequence will have Rashmi singled. But again, there's a lot of value in including somebody if you're able to beat that horse, which is why I have the 4 as a C. And if you're playing this as an ABC grid, you can punch that 4 A's 1 C combo for, what is that, $18. So it's not a ton with not a ton of risk with a lot of upside if you are able to beat a 1 to 5 or 1 to 9 shot in there. And the general opinion in race 4 at Santa Anita, I think we're pretty lockstep there just to try to beat the 4, just because if you get the very likely single in that race before, then you want to try to beat favorites somewhere. 5, 7, 8 out of the non-wagering event. Hopefully one of those 3 horses out of there is able to get the job done. And then just from a ticket construction standpoint, I don't really want to double the ticket or even triple the ticket with both, Commandment or even the Puma or even Nearly. So it just seems most logical to pick one of those horses because it doesn't really seem like there's going to be a big discrepancy in the odds come post time or even the pick 5 payouts as well. I think those will probably be pretty even amongst those 3 or 4 in there. So it just seems logical and economically smart to pick one.
I completely agree with you. You'll see that my grid is very similar to that, considering that we're going to do the exact same thing in that race. I agree. The Gulfstream Park 11 is very, very tough. By far the hardest race in this sequence, even though I have 4 horses also in Santa Anita's 5th race. But 2, 3, 4, 8. I like the one that you have in there a little bit too. I can't think of the name. I think it's Play Me a Tune, if I'm not mistaken, who's run very, very nice races on synthetic, not necessarily to the dirt, but those races at all transfer onto the Gulfstream Park surface. That horse has a ton of chance at a nice price. So I'm going 2, 3, 4, 8 there to try and get by with some type of middling price and save my life in that race. One, you talked about trying to beat the 1. I have the 4 as a C as well, but I'm going with Miss Artois as trying to save me again, and I cannot wait to use the meme of Noah's face. Back to the well, as they say. But 1, 3 again. If you even in a caveman, I'm doubling my ticket by $30. But if she does come in, I mean, it's by way more than a $32 difference. So I'm willing to take the little bit of risk there. Noah said $18 to add the 4 as a C. I'll take the $32 hit to try and beat the 1 with that. But 5, 6 in the next race. No much more to say there. I'm a little bit spreadier in the 5th race at Santa Anita. I have the 8 in there. However, I have the 3, 4, and the 5 in that race. So trying to get by, maybe catch a little bit of a price there. and then Singling Commandment. I've talked about how much I love him at endless length over the last week. So hopefully that works out. If it doesn't, I sure hope it works out the first Saturday of May, selfishly for myself. But everyone, thank you guys all for tuning in to this edition of Wire to Wire on the HHH Racing Podcast. Noah, thanks so much for joining me. And of course, thanks to everyone watching. It was a fantastic show, and it's a fantastic sequence as it goes through not only Santa Anita's 3, 4, and 5, but it is the Army Mule and the Florida Derby to both start and end the sequence on the March 28th edition of the Coast to Coast Pick 5. And for my co-hosts, Noah Maher, this has been your host, Kyle Roscoe, in the March 26th edition of Wire to Wire here on the HHH Racing Podcast, sponsored by Santa Anita and First Racing. And until next time, everybody, crush those bets, win those photos, and stay safe, everyone. We'll see you in the next one. Have a good night.
If you have not followed his Triple H Horse Racing Podcast, you're missing out. It's one of the best podcasts in the country.